Back in 2016, voters in the Puget Sound region approved a $54 billion plan to expand light rail, commuter trains, and bus rapid transit. This plan was known as Sound Transit 3, and it was meant to bring much-needed transit to the region. As of making this video, there's currently only one light rail line in Seattle. The one line travels north and south, extending from the SeaTac Airport to the Northgate Mall. In the coming years, the Sound Transit 2 plan will add connections from downtown Seattle to Bellevue and Redmond. Sound Transit 3 will add more connections to Tacoma and Everett, which would make the one line unconventionally long, so the plan is to split it into two separate lines, one traveling from Ballard to Tacoma, and another traveling from West Seattle to Everett. Passing Sound Transit 3 was also a symbolic victory. Back in 1968, Seattle did have the opportunity to build a metro system that would have largely been funded by the federal government. Unfortunately, this provision did not pass the vote threshold needed, and the funding was sent to Atlanta instead. In a way, Sound Transit 3 represents fixing past mistakes and creating a transit system that better services the people who live in the King County region. I really do wish the video could end here, but Sound Transit 3 has not been progressing smoothly in the slightest. 7 years after Sound Transit 3 passed, the company who handles the regional rail system, Sound Transit, is stepping away from the voter-approved line. And they have been proposing stations that make the line feel less useful. Arguably, the most important location for a station in this expansion is the International District and Chinatown. Here there are two stations, Union Station and King Street Station. Union Station functions as a central hub for the Link Light Rail Lines 1 and 2, while King Street Station functions as a hub for city buses, Sounder commuter trains, and Amtrak Cascades trains. Building a station here would allow simple, intuitive transfers between light rail, commuter rail, and city buses within one centralized location. Sadly, despite the effectiveness of this station as a transit hub, it may be on the chopping block. During a March 23rd Board of Directors meeting, Sound Transit backed a last-minute proposal to skip Chinatown International District and instead construct two split stations, with one awkwardly placed to the south of Chinatown and one to the north of Chinatown, which is a massive departure from the original vision. It's already a rather boneheaded decision to have a light rail line travel near a crucial transit hub but not actually connect with it, but what's worse is the placement of the proposed South Station, under 6th Avenue South between Seattle Boulevard and a spaghetti mess of freeway interchanges. One of the fundamental principles of a good transit system is it must bring people from the places they live to the places they want to go to. Which begs the question, why would anyone want to go here? A station here would effectively dump riders into an empty, non-place that could be a long walk to more substantial parts of town. The space surrounding Union Station, on the other hand, is filled with homes, restaurants, parks, and of course, plenty of other transit lines. This option brings up a lot of concerns with walkability and cohesion with the rest of the transit system. According to Sound Transit's own projections, a vast majority of people will travel to the station by walking or transferring from other forms of transit. So it is baffling that they would even consider placing a station in a location that cannot be accessed by transit and is difficult to access by walking. The Link Light Rail does not exist within a vacuum. It must function complementary to other forms of transit and allow for simple, intuitive transfers. Unless someone is daring or desperate enough, chances are they wouldn't want to risk regularly crossing this road, meaning it is an invitation to never take transit. As for the station proposed to the north of Chinatown, this would be located near Pioneer Square at 4th Avenue and James Street. This doesn't sound as bad, but it gets worse the more you look at it. The platform would be located 105 feet deep, and it would require the use of multiple escalators or a single elevator to exit the station. Transit riders would also have to walk upwards of 5 minutes to transfer through a tunnel until they reached the other stations in Pioneer Square. This is an issue because people may not want to have routine trips where they walk an extended period of time. Longer transfers also increases the likelihood that someone may miss their next train or bus as they walk from one end of the facility to the other, so it is best to make sure the trip between stops are as concise as possible. The north of Chinatown option would also mean removing a voter-approved Midtown station at 4th Avenue in Madison, adjacent to the Seattle Public Library. Sound Transit expected 15,500 daily boardings at the station, but I suppose they aren't concerned with losing those riders. There is still some hope that Sound Transit does the right thing and pursues a station located in the Chinatown International District and a Midtown station. During that same March 23rd meeting, Sound Transit voted 10-6 to approve a study for a 4th shallower station and a Midtown station. This station would preserve a crucial transit hub, and it would have shorter transfer times, around 2 to 3 minutes. It's all around a better option than either the north or south station, and it helps maintain a high density of stations within the downtown area. It may seem bizarre that Sound Transit would even humor the idea of not going with a 4th shallower station, and arguments for splitting the station to the north and south boil down to costs and not wanting to displace people during construction. Constructing a shallow station under 4th Avenue would be expensive because the 2nd Avenue Extension Bridge, South Jackson Street Bridge, and the 4th Avenue Viaduct may need to be repaired or replaced. Some of Sound Transit's board members are not keen on the idea of spending hundreds of millions on this repair. This is a short-sighted austerity measure. Most people don't care about the cost of infrastructure. When someone is driving, they aren't tallying up the expense that went into asphalt surfaces, concrete sidewalks, drainage, sewer systems, buried power lines, or the traffic signals. All they care about is the finished project and the experience it has on the driver. The same applies to transit. Nobody is going to think, wow, Sound Transit saves so much money with this lousy station placement. They are going to angrily shake their fists at whoever made the transit system inconvenient and janky. Furthermore, it sounds like these replacements will be necessary anyway. These bridges are fairly old and in disrepair, so the city and Sound Transit may as well kill two birds with one stone and simultaneously update the existing infrastructure and construct a 4th shallower station. Usually, when trying to reduce costs, the goal is to deliver the same quality transit system for less money. It doesn't make much sense to deliver an inferior system, especially when those changes may harm ridership to the point where it may not even be worth maintenance and upkeep. You want to know what's worse than an expensive transit project? An expensive transit project for something that sucks. Construction in Chinatown is also a touchy subject, and Sound Transit wishes to avoid harming the community. But moving the stations does not save the area from construction. It just moves the development further south, meaning people have to endure the construction, and when it is finished, endure over a century of negative impacts to riders. Transit needs to be treated as a wealth multiplier because it provides an equitable mode of transportation and it can be a catalyst for new developments. Refusing to bring transit to the area would cut people living in Chinatown from light rail access, which would only further neglect the community. They also wouldn't reap any benefits of transit being a wealth multiplier because transit would literally be skipping the neighborhood. When you get right down to it, the claim of wanting to avoid construction impacts feels hollow, and it's not a particularly compelling argument to avoid building a crucial transit hub. Of course, after this meeting, more news about station shenanigans came into light. The original plan called for building 2 stations, with a South Lake Union station running along Harrison Street and an additional station along Westlake Avenue. Now it appears Sound Transit is pursuing a new alternative that shifts Denny Way Station north. This may not seem like a particularly big deal since they are roughly in the same location, but part of the issue is that it would require an additional environmental impact study, which would add additional costs, and it may delay the project further. The rationale behind this alternative comes from the impact construction would have on traffic. Sound Transit believes they would have to close the busy Westlake Avenue for 4 years during construction. The shifted north option, on the other hand, would require 2 of Westlake's 4 to 5 lanes to close for 2 years, while a temporary double-decked Westlake is built. Personally, this alternative doesn't sound too bad, but it isn't exactly clear why decking isn't a suitable option for the original location. It seems like an awfully long process to perform an environmental impact study when this may be able to minimize traffic impacts on the station that was already studied. There are bound to be disruptions when you build a transit system after the rest of the city has been constructed. Nevertheless, a city can recover from closing a street to build a transit station, but it's a lot more difficult to recover from a poorly designed transit system. In fact, we should be more willing to disrupt traffic in order to build transit, because every single driver that is being put into a train is ultimately helping relieve congestion. And boy, is there a lot of congestion during rush hour, because all these cars have one person in them and they're all trying to get on the freeway that is also congested. The short-term impacts of traffic are ultimately negligible when compared to the number of riders that could be attracted by these permanent upgrades to the transit system. The worst-case scenario is another alternative that involves deleting the South Lake Union Station and instead having one consolidated station that is shifted west. The South Lake Union Station is projected to see 10,000 daily riders, and this is probably the last opportunity to build a light rail station that serves South Lake Union. Good station density is important for making transit a viable option. If transit stations aren't within walking distance, it is going to be more difficult for people to justify taking transit. The South Lake Union and Midtown stations help ensure that there is ample density for people living near the downtown area to have close access to reliable transit. It also helps make for a more comfortable experience because you aren't cramming all the riders into one station. Unfortunately, some of Sound Transit's board members don't seem to see the big deal with refusing to invest in an additional station that serves the community. Sound Transit Council board member and Snohomish County executive Dave Somers argued that there is a $600 million total savings to shift Denny Station west and scrap the Harrison stop. This, once again, is a short-sighted austerity measure. Rather than thinking about how South Lake Union is going to be formed over the course of generations, is more concerned with how expensive it would be to build a station. Claudia Balducci rebukes this nicely by saying, "By that logic, we shouldn't build any stations. We could save a lot of money." Even Amazon has been working to lobby for the shifted west option. In a statement issued on July 26th, they wrote, "The current plan calls for a new station on Westlake Avenue. This option will shut down this main artery in downtown Seattle for at least 4 full years. It will make mobility for our employers, neighbors, and visitors incredibly difficult, greatly increasing traffic and negatively impacting local businesses. That's why we are urging the Sound Transit Board to support the Denny Station shifted west option without impacting the proposed Harrison Station. Amazon is going to push hard for the shifted west option in order to minimize traffic impacts at the expense of transit riders. When advocating for transit, we have to know what we are up against, and we essentially have to pressure Sound Transit harder than Amazon is going to lobby. Corporate interests want to undermine a voter-approved transit system, and that should make people angry enough to turn out to meetings and try to dissuade them from making these bad decisions. This is why I'm not concerned with the cost of building transit. I would rather it just be built within a reasonable amount of time, and it be a good service that is useful for people. When austerity measures are considered, then these are the decisions that get made, consolidating stations and gutting crucial transit hubs for the sake of saving money with no consideration with how it is going to affect riders in the long term. Rather than trying to undermine a voter-approved transit expansion, Sound Transit should just be looking for ways to deliver on this promise. I do have some hope that the worst-case scenario will be avoided But it is frustrating that this debate will only further delay a transit system that needs to be constructed. There are better ways for Sound Transit to cut down on costs. First, they could reduce the amount of parking being built in suburban light rail stations. Park and rides are not inherently bad. They are an important measure for getting suburbanites to avoid driving into the city. However, it can still be costly to construct a parking garage that supplies people with ample parking. Recently, Sound Transit has invested $350 million to increase parking at 3 different Sounder train stations, in the hopes that the additional parking would attract more drivers who would ride the trains. It is a massive subsidy, penciling out to more than $200,000 per parking space. Parking should not be nearly as high of a priority as building the stations and increasing the frequency of existing routes. Ridership must be treated as a service issue, and since a vast majority of people walk to transit, it would be a lot better to fill the stations with more walkable neighborhoods than to fill them with parking for suburbanites trying to get into the city. The second thing Sound Transit can do is better utilize the existing right-of-way along their transit routes. Back in June, leaked plans for the Link Light Rail extension in Everett was found to displace a lot of people in this town. Many apartments, townhouses, and businesses were within the planned path of the extension, so going through with this plan would require numerous expensive property acquisitions. Sound Transit may also be forced to provide assistance to displaced tenants, and it would be time-consuming to acquire all these properties just to bulldoze them. To avoid costs from various property acquisitions, it would be better to utilize the existing right-of-way and construct the light rail line over the existing stroads. Sadly, Sound Transit staff seems more interested in preserving the space for cars than preserving the places people live in, work at, socialize at, and so on. Board member Claudia Balducci asked Sound Transit staff if they would study alternatives within the existing right-of-way, and they cited traffic as the principal reason for not looking further into streets. These are the kinds of statements that are made when Sound Transit is comprised of people who believe transit riders and drivers are two separate entities. And it's not a good sign when they are more willing to demolish homes and businesses than inconvenience drivers. Better utilizing the existing right-of-way and avoiding property acquisitions whenever possible would help lower costs and reduce delays. It would also make transit more competitive, and with a more competitive transit system, ridership may increase as more drivers shift to taking transit. Basically, there is a right way and a wrong way to reduce costs, and anything that is detrimental to the rider's experience or delays construction indefinitely is the wrong way to do it. So, what can we do about this? Well, like with any politician, you can pester them into doing the right thing. The local transit advocates at Seattle Subway has put together a letter you can write to Sound Transit board members. Simply fill out the information on this page and you can start telling them to stop wasting time. You can also contact the board members and Mayor Bruce Harrell directly. This must also be treated as a political issue, with consequences for not following through with the original Sound Transit 3 plan. The Sound Transit Board is comprised of 18 locally elected officials. If people who undermines the Sound Transit 3 plan can be voted out and replaced with people like Claudia Balducci, we can see more sound decisions from Sound Transit.
Alright, get lost, all of you! You're fired! Go on, scram! Get out of here, you moochers! That's right, keep moving!
You know what? Yeah.
Except you stay.
I am glad to be living somewhere that is capable of pursuing great transit projects, but it is equally frustrating that Sound Transit is shooting themselves in the foot by playing around with austerity measures and trying to value engineer a transit system that will shape Seattle's growth for generations to come. The people here didn't vote for a cheap transit solution, they voted for a good one, and Sound Transit needs to deliver.